Hi, folks. Back and reviewing movies again. This time, not a James Bond film. I gave it some thought, and the channel is called Son of the Cinema, so it's not Son of James Bond. So I'll have to, sprinkle in a few other movies amongst the Bond classics. And the film I've chosen today is The Untouchables by Brian De Palma, a gangster film from the late 80s. Of course, there is a Bond connection because Sean Connery is in this movie, and in fact won an Oscar for his portrayal of Jimmy Malone, a streetwise cop. This is an extraordinary film. Gangster films are really hard to pull off, particularly since the benchmark was set so high in the 70s by Francis Ford Coppola with the Godfather films. So gangster films tended to be either formulaic or derivative and didn't find an identity of their own and never reaching those kind of heights. But what De Palma has done is actually chosen a story which is factual, and that is the capture of Al Capone. Now, American filmmakers have tended to glamorize their nation's history, and films about American history, are either too factual, so they're kind of bordering almost on documentaries. They're really flat and boring, or they go so far off with taking dramatic license that they're kind of just not anchored in reality. And De Palma finds the perfect blend of fact and fiction. In fact, he's included a lot of facts in the film. One is that Al Capone was actually imprisoned for tax evasion. He wasn't gunned down by the FBI, as some people claim. The other thing is that there's a sequence, quite a horrific sequence in the movie, where Al Capone bludgeons to death one of his lackeys with a baseball bat. Now, that actually happened. So De Palma's very cleverly kind of mixed fact and fiction, and it works seamlessly. The balance is absolutely perfect. So the story concerns a Treasury agent, Elliot Ness, who is brought in during the Prohibition era to try and nail Al Capone, who's having a field day with his bootlegging activities. And Ness is extremely enthusiastic, but unfortunately wet behind the ears and incredibly naive, and fails dismally. That is until he encounters Jimmy Malone, played by Sean Connery, who's this world-weary beat cop who secretly wants to muscle in on the action. But he says to Ness, what are you prepared to do in order to catch Capone, and becomes his mentor. And there's some wonderful dialogue courtesy of the great playwright David Mamet. There's a scene in a church where Connery says to Elliot Ness, you want to catch Capone? Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He puts one of yours in the hospital, you put one of his in the morgue. That's the Chicago way. And it's dialogue bristling with intent, and Mamet spices up the script with an incredible dialogue, incredible characters. He really captures a Chicago and being a Chicago native himself, he knows the town, and he's really painted a very visceral, incredibly textured portrayal of corruption. And it's really, being a stage a writer, he's a playwright. He plays are really, in essence, are stories told with words, and so he's an incredible wordsmith. And so the characters that he has created have got such rich dialogue and such complex, contradictory characters. Elliot Ness is a perfect example. Starts off with this naive, treasury agent, and ends up being this ruthless killer, through what is he prepared to do to capture Capone. So he's got an extraordinary arc. And all the characters are like this. And the story plays out with, bittersweet results. We all know how it ends. Capone is captured. But is it predictable? Not at all. Is the journey rough and up and down? Absolutely. The film is called The Untouchables because it's about this group of four men who are known as the Untouchables because they cannot be bribed. They are the Untouchables. And there's a very poignant scene where one of them is killed by Frank Nitti, and he writes in blood on the lift where he kills this guy, touchable. And Connery in his dying moments says to Elliot Ness, what are you prepared to do? You know, it's an incredibly poignant and relevant film for this time, in the face of corruption, in the face of evil, in the face of injustice. You know, what are we prepared to do? Are we prepared to stand up and be counted, and prepared to lose everything? You know, but to stand in the for righteousness and stand for what's right. You know, and not for the lie. So, it's really a very poignant film. Brian De Palma, I think it's his best movie. His direction is absolutely seamless. He doesn't put a step wrong throughout. You know, De Palma's always been known as a visually strong director. You know, he started off with films in the early 70s. Blowout was a great movie. Sisters, Carrie, of course. You know, he's got a hit of really good successes and then started to tail off. And he's made some terrible movies. But, you know, a lot of great filmmakers have made terrible movies. Spielberg hasn't made a good film in the last 20 years. Ridley Scott hasn't made a good film in the last 20 years. You know, The Untouchables is probably the last good film that Brian De Palma made. It really is a bravura piece of filmmaking. You know, some people have said that, oh, well, De Palma steals, and he steals from Eisenstein and from Hitchcock. Well, you know, if you're going to steal from the best. And every artist is influenced by another artist. You can see that the influences in every artist's work. So, you know, that's a fact. Everybody's influenced by somebody. But De Palma has cleverly kind of mixed it with his own unique style. And there are some incredible set pieces in this movie. The ones that come to mind is the raid on the Canadian border, the one-shot sequence where Connery is stalked in his apartment by an assassin, and of course the end sequence on the steps of the station, the final shootout, which is an extraordinary piece of filmmaking. What's interesting is that in the script it was actually supposed to be a showdown on a train, and at the last minute they couldn't get the train. There was a problem, and De Palma was forced to improvise, and he used the steps of the Union Station and created this sequence that mirrored the famous sequence in the battleship Potemkin by Sergei Eisenstein, and with a baby in a pram. And it works an absolute treat. It is one of the greatest action sequences of the last 30, 40 years. The multiple setups, the build-up of tension, the close-ups, the slow motion. It is really like, it's something that should be studied at film schools. It's that good. It rivals, you know, Peckinpah's Wild Bunch finale. It's a great action sequence worth watching again and again for aspiring filmmakers. Yeah, the performances, but everything that pulls this film together is the script by David Mamet. It's a superbly written script. There's not an ounce of fat on it. In terms of the transitions, from scene to scene, every scene moves the story forward. The dialogue is bristling with intent. It's a superb screenplay, and De Palma elicits outstanding performances from his cast. Sean Connery steals the show as Malone. He's funny, he's poignant, he's angry. It's a real salt of the earth performance, and it has such heart. You know, he would have won the Oscar on his death sequence alone, but he really anchors the film in a kind of a moral strength that really gives this film resonance. And Kevin Costner, superb, one of his earlier performances as a sort of self-righteous treasury agent who gradually kind of realizes what he has to do, and his arc is extraordinary. This is what I'm saying. David Mamet has created such complex characters. You know, he starts off as being one thing, this family man, and then you just see this transition where he realizes what he has to do, what he has to compromise, and you know, how he ends up in the end. You know, it's a very complicated character. Andy Garcia's character, the kind of rookie cop, Charles Martin Smith's character, Billy Drago as Frank Nitti. There's so many great performances in this film. Al Pacino. Sure, sorry, Robert De Niro. I'm giving Al Pacino your glory. Robert De Niro, superb performance as Al Capone. I mean, he went as far as talking about method acting. finding Al Capone's actual underwear. Cool. Yeah, I know. But he really is superb. He oozes menace in every scene that he's in. That baseball scene is chilling. It's one of De Niro's finest performances. It is really, really a brilliant piece of acting, together with Connery's and the supporting cast. It is an ensemble piece. I can't recommend this film highly enough. The music by Ennio Morricone actually won a Grammy for this soundtrack. Can you believe it? I didn't know that. Stephen Burham's superb cinematography, the production design, which was Oscar nominated as well. In fact, even the costumes were by Giorgio Armani. So this film, from top to bottom, is absolutely inspired. It's bloody, lawless, and brilliant.